Well, hello. How's everyone doing out there? And who is out there? Say hi, because I'm hoping that you people that are going to be watching me today are going to be able to help me out. Because in today's presentation, I am planning on doing a real-time analysis. This one is on skincare. And so I want to do a real-time analysis and then show you how the process that I use when I'm formulating. And what would I call it? My client, my guinea pig? I don't know. The person that was going to be on live with me had to cancel at the last minute. So what we're going to do today, in order to make this work, is I need your help. What we're going to need today is we're going to need a skin condition to work on. So maybe you have a client, maybe you have your own skin condition that you'd like to talk about. And so it's a process. Now, I do this in my classes. When I was teaching at university, we did this a lot anyway, where we would just make it up. We'd come up with, here's a goal, therapeutic goal. I'm going to explain that, and how we would go through the process of analyzing and then the process of formulating. I'm going to need your help. So please, please, please help me out in the comments. Just list, any kind of skin condition that we want to work on. And, if I get a few different ones from different people, we'll play around with it a bit and try and put it into one person. We're going to create a person. I am Jim Harrison, essential oil expert, been at it for 30 years. And I've been in, I think almost every area you can possibly be in working with aromatherapy and essential oils, except for distillation, which I understand very, very well. But, I have formulated skincare, plant-based, now called biophilic skincare. I have taught across the globe essential oil courses, certification courses. And so that's what I'm bringing to you today, is all that information. This one specifically about creating skincare formulations using my holistic essential oil triad. I'm going to explain what the triad is. In a lot of my courses, a lot of these webinars, I have explained the triad. So if you've seen it already, you're going to see it again. Let me bring that up. I have a couple of different slides I have to work with here. Okay, so this is what we're going to be doing: formulating skin remedies with the essential oil triad. And, I'll explain, what is the triad? How does that work? And I'm going to review, show you the system. Now, when I talk about the holistic essential oil triad, this isn't something new that I created. This is, traditional, what is known as holistic therapy. Most people refer to it as mind, body, spirit. I find that terminology to be extremely limited. And also, when it comes to working with essential oils, what does that mean? Mind, body, spirit. And so what I did was I developed the holistic essential oil triad to show the holistic properties of essential oils, but do it in a way that's not outside of having some form of scientific structure. And so that's what the essential oil triad is all about. Before I get started here, just let me remove a couple of things so that that's not in the way. Go away. Yes, there you go. Let me just, before we get started here, I also want to just show you how to get in touch with me as we go along here. So if you have to get off the webinar, for what reason, I don't know. But if you have to, this is how to get in touch with me, question answer. I do a free 30-minute coaching or consultation. If you'd like to get some information on how I work, I do expert visitations to resort spas everywhere else. I do education, formulation, all of those things. So if you need to get in touch with me, this is one way of doing it, or on my website, which is jimharrison.com. So we don't need that anymore. And we'll go back to working with this. The word holistic comes up a lot, right? When we're working with essential oils and any kind of therapy. I mean, you're in the wellness industry. If you're in the wellness industry, you basically are working from a holistic perspective, because we know that you can't just treat an area of a person apart, right? So that's what holistic is all about. We understand that everything is made of parts, but in order to understand the structure or the system or the person, we need to look at those parts as being holistic, meaning that they're all connected, they're interconnected, they're communicating with each other. If you change one thing, you're changing the whole system. That's basically holistic. In working with essential oils, you're always working holistically. That's the beauty of essential oils, because essential oils work on all levels. Whether you're working with it that way or not, they work on all levels of wellness. And so I have them, basically written here, the three main categories that essential oils work from a holistic perspective. Emotional, I'm talking skincare today, and emotions are a big part of understanding skin conditions. You need to understand who the person is emotionally and what the physical triggers are that they're responding to, and how those physical triggers through the emotions are affecting skin health. Physical, that's always the obvious. Again, let's go back to skincare. When we're talking about skincare, what are we talking about physically? We're talking about the physical appearance of the skin, the cellular structure, the keratinized cells, that cutaneous layer that's at the surface, that should look bright and healthy and beautiful, right? And what goes on underneath that top layer is you have a lipid barrier. So there's a physical structure called the lipid barrier that's within what's called the epidermis. The epidermis is the top layer of the skin. And there's layers of cells there. If you're a skincare guy, you know this stuff, right? So I'm not going to really give you all the details here. So you have these layers, and each one of those layers are affected by your overall health, especially emotionally. So there's physical properties to the skin, nervous system, the blood supply, immune system. All of these matter when it comes to the physical aspects of your skin. And then there's energetic health, which, how do you explain energetic health, right? You can look at it from a scientific perspective, right? We're made of molecules, and molecules are atoms, and atoms are electrons and protons. And when you start putting atoms together to create molecules, you start creating electromagnetic charge. An electromagnetic charge would be energetic. Now, in relationship to this terminology, energetic health, we go a little bit beyond that, because people talk about frequencies. Certain illnesses have a certain frequency. Essential oils are seen to have a certain frequency. So there's a lot of frequency talk. What does that mean? That's another discussion when I really get into the metaphysical properties, which I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about that stuff. And so energetic can also mean chakras and chi, life force, prana, marmas. All of these different, a lot come from the Eastern philosophy and Eastern practices in medicine. And there are things that have not been documented, or I really should say well documented, in scientific studies, which, scientific studies are kind of limited, right? And in order to work on an energetic level, in some ways we have to get outside of traditional scientific methodology. So the scientific studies can be limited in the way that they understand energetic or metaphysical aspects to health, wellness, and working with essential oils. Now, this starts getting into my triad, holistic essential oil triad, which, like I said, is nothing new. I've just restructured it to have a better understanding of how essential oils work, because we tend to compartmentalize a lot of the ways we use essential oils. So what I've listed here is inhalation, which, generally when we think we smell an oil, olfactory response, it's always emotional, right? You smell it, you feel good. You smell it and you're energized. You smell it and you got focus. These rather obscure emotional properties to smelling an oil. Now, to get away from, I just used the word obscure, they're really not obscure, because when you smell through the olfactory system, there are physical properties, there's physiology, there's signaling, there's communication, nervous system communication that is triggering a physical response, meaning hormonal or neurotransmitter release that makes us feel a certain way. So it does trigger emotion. And then emotion does become more elusive because, you know, there's emotional memory in the olfactory system. So when you're inhaling an oil, you are creating a memory and an emotion connected with the scent. Every emotion, every memory has a scent attachment. That's an important thing to understand when it comes to the olfactory system. So inhaling an oil has an emotional effect, but it also has effects in the nervous system. So there are physical properties to inhalation. Topical use, we generally think of that on a more physical level. I just put a newsletter into LinkedIn. And so if you're on YouTube watching this, subscribe, like, all that good stuff. But go to LinkedIn and you'll find some newsletters. And I generally will put some of those newsletters on my blog. So jimharrison.com, again, is where you go to find some of the information. Now, this newsletter has to do with the neurotransmitters, actually not neurotransmitters, the receptors that are in the skin. So when you put an oil on topically, you know, generally people think, well, it absorbs into the bloodstream and you get this reaction. And it's like, not quite. That does happen, but that's not where the real effect is coming from. A lot of the effect topically is coming from receptor cells and, you know, nervous system receptors. There's the endocannabinoid system. There's the olfactory nerve endings within the skin, which I think is cool. So topically, oils penetrate, and then they have ways of working, creating physical changes within the skin. So inhalation, topical. These are generally the ways we think about how we use essential oils. Now, topical and inhalation also have what we would call the energetic responses or metaphysical. So when we think of chakras, you know, I mean, you could do it in a way where you're not touching the body in any way. You're not putting the oils on topically. And is there a frequency? Is there an energetic response between the oil and the chakra? I'm going to say, sure, why not? But I don't understand it, you know, and it's not that I don't understand it from a perspective on how it works and why it works, but understanding it from a perspective of a scientific study that says when that oil is within, you know, this space between your chakra and the oil, that it can have a resonant type response. It can trigger, you know, chakra balance, basically, is the way we always refer to it, right? But there are a lot of these energetic or metaphysical responses that happen using essential oils and using them either topically or through inhalation or just on an energetic space process, however you like to do that. Here we get to the holistic triad, because basically I just talked about the holistic triad: inhalation, topical, and metaphysical. So the triad helps to guide your essential oil practice. It actually makes your work much more effective, okay? And the way it does that is by understanding that every time you use an oil, these three factors, which I'm listing at the bottom here, olfactory, pharmacology, metaphysical, these are the three categories. These are the triads: metaphysical, olfactory, and pharmacology. I'm calling it pharmacological or pharmacology because I'm looking at how we understand drug, pharmaceutical-like responses, which generally are cell receptor activity. You know, what is the binding? What is that oil triggering through the physiology, you know, the metabolism, whatever. So there's lots of different ways that essential oils can create a physical response, and that can be understood through basic pharmacology. You know, that is something you can study in a lab, because that's basically the methodology of a lot of studies, is understanding a thing, substance, a molecule like an essential oil molecule, and how does that create a reaction when it binds with cellular structure? Does it penetrate the cellular membrane, or does it just respond on cellular receptors? There's all these different ways of looking at it, but it's a physical, pharmaceutical-like activity, and that's what the pharmacology category is all about. Metaphysical, I kind of explained that already, what that's all about. Energetics, things we can't, I call it my I don't know category. So olfactory, pharmacology, metaphysical, that's what we're talking about when we talk about the essential oil triad. Okay, here's my essential oil triad diagram. And I wanted to put this together to give a visual understanding that when you use an essential oil, here's what's going on. Again, I said people get into a lane, right? They get into a category. And if you're doing for emotions, people go olfactory, you want to smell it, you want to inhale it. And that's primarily true, but not always. There can be emotional responses when you use the oil and it responds to cell receptors. But we don't know that for sure because so many of the studies, when we try to understand essential oils, don't block the nasal passage. And they also can't block, when you breathe in through your mouth, you're also getting an olfactory response, right? So it's hard to dismiss or isolate, what is a better word. It's too hard to isolate an olfactory response when you're using the oil topically. And this, again, is why it's not a separation of these. They're all happening simultaneously. Every time you use an essential oil, there's an olfactory response, a pharmacological response, and a metaphysical response. All three are happening at the same time. So the more you understand and study the essential oil from this perspective, the more accurate your essential oil therapy will be. So in the olfactory system, in that category, we can, in a way, isolate memory and emotion because that's a very specific response when you smell. And, that's again, there's the scent bonding is what I'm calling it here. Memory and emotion is an important thing to understand when you're working with essential oils because what your memory association is and emotion goes along with that is with a certain scent is going to trigger how you respond to the oil. I was just with a friend yesterday and I made this beautiful smelling fragrance for, I'm making a hair tonic. Can you tell? I'm growing bangs. I'm not the best example for any time I say I have a hair therapy formulation, but it works. Anyway, it smells good. It smells really good. And I was over there yesterday and her husband was telling me she can't stand the smell. She said it smells like an old lady or, some of these other things. And the way that it was being described to me sound very much like there was a negative memory emotion association with the way that fragrance smelled. Is it a memory that triggers it smells like grandma or something like that? No, it doesn't always have to be that way. Because a lot of our association with a scent is emotional, and we do not even recognize that a scent is creating a feeling. This is all part of the olfactory's protective mechanism. Through an evolutionary process, our olfactory system is part of what tells us what's going on in our environment. Is it safe or is it dangerous? And we're always responding to our scent environment in that way. So it's very important to understand memory scent association or memory emotion scent bonding. And, when people have reactions or kind of sit back, they don't like the smell, it's not about they need it and things like that you hear about in aromatherapy. It's that they have an emotional memory with that scent. Now, when it starts crossing over, a lot of the responses that you get from the olfactory system are triggering physical responses. So it gets into pharmacology. So there's a crossover between an olfactory response and a pharmacological response, because when you smell through the limbic system, triggering certain neurotransmitters to be released, serotonin, GABA, and the way they phrase that is you can have a serotonergic response. You can have a GABAergic response. And what that refers to is that the essential oil might be triggering those specific compounds, and those compounds are released in the body. And then when they bind to the receptors, they trigger whatever the response is that goes with that compound, the serotonin or the dopamine or whatever. And so this is the way essential oils work. Through the olfactory system, it's triggering a physical pharmacological response. So you cannot separate pharmacology from olfactory. And that's why stay out of the lane, okay? This is your new lane. Your new lane includes everything, even more so than what I have written on this chart. And pharmacology has the same thing. So, I already explained it as cell receptors. You put it on your skin, and there are receptors. And when those receptors respond, they trigger a physical feeling, physical response. There's wound healing in the skin that's due to binding with olfactory receptors. And so the pharmacology is generally understanding from receptor science is what it's referred to. The getting into metaphysical, both pharmacology and both olfactory are also part of a metaphysical response. There's intention in verbal cues that in a way are a metaphysical way of thinking about how to use essential oils. So, and I use this example a lot because it was a study that they wanted to check for, people responding to an oil that was known for stress relief or relaxation. And then they wanted to test for oil that's energizing. So the group of people come into the room, and the study leader says, "Here, smell this. It's relaxing. You're going to be calm." 100% through skin readings, skin conduct. I can talk, right? Skin conductivity readings and brainwave readings. 100%. Everyone showed they were calm by that oil. They did the same thing with an energizing oil. 100%. Everyone was calm or energized. Skin conductivity, brainwave readings, 100% energized. Both oils were lavender. And so what this demonstrates, and one of the things that, where this could have been a flaw, it might not have been lavender. Could have been a synthetic lavender because it wasn't an aromatherapy study. It was a study with, just some random scientists going, essential oils, that's all nonsense. It's all about the olfactory system. But it doesn't matter because intention and verbal cues is what's that called. This is relaxing. This is energizing. That's a verbal cue. And it can change the activity. Now, another way of demonstrating that is like if you like wine and you've had a sommelier demonstrating different wines and you're smelling it, and you go, kind of dipping your nose in the glass. And the sommelier says, "Are you smelling the vanilla notes?" Now, you didn't detect any vanilla note until that person said, "Are you smelling the vanilla note?" And then, "Oh yeah, I smell the vanilla note." I've done that often with essential oils in my classes. If I have a blend and people aren't detecting one of the notes that I have in that blend, I'll refer to it. And then all of a sudden, everyone's smelling, "Oh yeah, I smell the menthol. Yeah. And in the blend, when I try to do fragrance blends, I don't want any one specific compound to come at the top. I want it to be a whole fragrance. I want it to be identified as an individual, unique fragrance. But when I start pointing out certain molecules, a certain scents, then people smell it. So that's what verbal cues is all about. And that goes from, an intention is also part of that. When I write a name on a label for a formula that I make, like Optimistic Glow, which is one of my best examples, I think. What do you think? What's the intention? Optimism. And I'm going to glow. I'm going to be happy, joyful, uplifting. And so the fragrance mimics that name, but the name also creates an intention and an expectation, and therefore you're going to have that response. So that's metaphysical combined with olfactory. And then, I really could have pharmacology stuck in there too, which is when you get to the middle and it says holistic healing, because it does bring all of those together. If you have a metaphysical verbal cue that triggers an olfactory response that also triggers a pharmacological physical response, you now have a holistic remedy, right? It's using all three categories in all aspects of the essential oil. So this is basic. I was going to say basically, I've kind of explained the whole triad to you just now, didn't I? Now, in order to do this analysis, we also need to determine what does the person need. And we know how to work holistically. And in the beauty industry, there's a terminology, it's beauty inside out, which is absolutely accurate for how we need to understand, because what's going on internally will show up on the surface. But in order to understand what's going on internally, we also need to understand what the exposure is, the environmental exposures, the lifestyle exposures. If we're talking about diet and we're saying from beauty inside out, yeah, diet matters. But before that food gets internal, that food is coming from an external environment. So we also have to understand, what is that food composed of? Where was it grown? Is it organic? Is it conventional? We need to understand these things, because in order to understand what's happening from a dietary level, we need to understand the quality of what's going inside. And so that's why I start outside, inside out. And this is nothing new. I'm not talking anything new here. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create these systems that have been fairly loose especially in the beauty industry and the wellness industry. And I want to bring them into a more cohesive structure, a better understanding. So when we talk about what's going on inside, what is it that's happening outside this person? What are their relationships like? The diet, the environment. Are they in the city? Are they in the country? What's going on? Where do they live? Who are they exposed to? What is their work environment like? This graphic kind of shows you a little bit, the CO2 exposure, and there's, work, and there's stresses, and, all of these different things. And so if there's a study or I don't know, it's not a licensing yet, but it's a position in the beauty industry. It's psychodermatology. And what we're doing there is, you need to be a psychologist in order to understand a lot of this information. But as practitioners, and you always want to work from your scope of license, right? So some questions that you would like to ask, you can't really ask because you're not a psychologist or psychotherapist. But, I've been in the beauty industry a long time. And, I started out as a clinician, mostly a hairdresser. And it's pretty interesting what people will tell you. And so you can get a lot of information, probably a lot more than a psychologist would get, because it's a more comforting, friendly, it's just a more relaxed situation where people are get a little more comfortable about exposing some of the things that they deal with. What's their partner like? Is it a good relationship? Are they single? Are they okay with being single? Does it stress them out being single? Are they lonely, or are they comfortable with themselves? All of these things are what are going to be internalized, and that's what's important. You want to look at the outside. How does that person internalize that information? You can have the same boss, right? Two people, same skin condition that you're dealing with. And when you ask them about the boss, the same boss, one person is like, I deal with it. No problem. So they're internalizing it in a more harmonious way, where the other person could be totally stressed out. Every time my boss opens their mouth, I'm stressed. It drives me crazy. I get into fight or flight. And that could be, that produces the skin condition that they have. With the other person with the same skin condition, you have to look at something else. They go home to a different environment. And is their environment, are there toxicities in their environment? And so many things that can't even be well understood, like EMFs. I live underneath the radio towers, TV towers here in Seattle. Is that affecting me? Maybe. I don't know. I don't really have any symptoms where I can relate it to that. I know that I need to be cautious, and I do take a lot of antioxidants and other things, and I'll put the aluminum hat on my head often, just not right now when I'm doing a webinar. So anyway, outside, inside out, we need to understand what's going on out here and how that person internalizes it. Now, I'm throwing in a little bit of extra, because when I do the analysis, I'm going to include chemistry. In chemistry is what's called functional group theory, which has been dismissed by a lot of the so-called experts in the aromatherapy industry, some of the top respected people. They say, no, functional group theory is ridiculous and nonsense, throw it out. What functional group theory refers to is this chart is a structure effect diagram, mostly developed by Pierre Franchomme, who is kind of the French medical aromatherapist. He wrote the book on French medical clinical aromatherapy. And in that book, he developed what's called the structure effect diagram. And this is looking at individual compounds, what group, and its functional group refers to the structure of that compound gets put into a chemical group, kind of like botanicals and animals. We have different categories of species, so it's that same thing. So the groups, like when we think about lavender has a compound called linyl acetate. It's an ester. So that big kind of greenish blue circle at the top where it says negative, that's the ester group. And there's negative charge, positive charge, top negative, bottom is positive. And then polarity, which is wet and dry, or polar, which is on the dry side, and nonpolar, which basically means its ability to bind with water. And so I found the structure effect diagram to be extremely useful for learning chemistry. I did not toss it out. It didn't make sense to me, and it's not very consistent, which is why they're trying to toss it out. They're going, well, it's not consistent, it's not accurate, but it's actually a good tool for learning essential oils and as a guide for how you select essential oils. So on the left side there is the structure effect diagram that has properties. So esters, sedating, calming, antispasmodic, and so on. Aldehydes, which, when you get the lemon-smelling lemongrass and lemon myrtle, things like that, that's one compound in the aldehyde family. And that has also sedative properties, but anti-inflammatory, antiviral. In the left lower corner there, you see the reddish colored shapes. And that's where your hot oils are, like oregano and cinnamon and thyme, thymol type. I'm not going to get into explaining chemotypes, which is thymol type. Those are hot oils. Those are antibacterial. So this is what this chart is all about. It's understanding some of the basic properties that you can find in these groupings. And it's again, just a guide. Now, what I've done with that is I found that when I work on skincare, I can use the structure effect diagram to help me select what oils I'm going to use based on their ideal chemistry. Now, essential oils are not just one group. They combine a few to many of the groupings when you look at the structure, the molecular structure, which means they get, hundreds to 1,000 or so compounds in each oil, depending on the complexity of the oil. So when I do this analysis, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the chemistry. So I have an 8-step system here. I should really move on because I hope someone's giving me some analysis over here. I don't have my comments up, so I can't see it. I hope someone is giving me something I can work on. And then you guys are all going to have input in this as we develop it. And we'll go, I'll make it up if I have to, but we'll go through it kind of, it won't be a long consultation type thing. All right, so my 8-step formulating system, this is what I'm going to be doing. The first thing I need to know is, what am I working on? Your therapeutic goal. What do you want the outcome to be? Now, the outcome is generally, like, if it's a skin condition, is it irritation? Is it acne? Is it rosacea? One of those general categories of a skin condition that you want to resolve. And so that's what your end goal is. You want to resolve that. But you have to understand from the outside, inside out system, what are the other conditions that may be causing that symptom that we want to resolve. Now, it's not always what's causing it, but it might be a related symptom that we need to deal with in order to create a holistic outcome, something that really treats the symptom in a more holistic way so that it's a long-term resolution instead of, I fixed it and then it's back tomorrow. We always want to go for the holistic outcome. All right, so that's step one. Where are you going? That's your GPS, right? And then this next step is, what therapeutic properties do you need? So if there's inflammation, What do you need? You need an anti-inflammatory. If there's irritation, what do you need? Anti-inflammatory, anti-irritant. If there's an infection, you need antimicrobial. Now, I'm not a medical doctor, and I cannot diagnose. And so nothing I'm saying here is diagnosing or treating a medical condition. What I'm doing is I'm analyzing what I see. Now, I am, as a cosmetologist, licensed cosmetologist, I can analyze the skin and I can diagnose what I see there from that scope of practice that my license allows. So you always have to work from your scope of practice. The beauty of working with essential oils is you never have to say anything about whether you are curing or diagnosing or anything like that. Now I'm going to, because, cosmetology, yes, like I said, I can do that. But for the most part, with essential oils, you can play around with the, legal qualifications and what you can get away with saying, because essential oils don't require you to talk about specifics. If I want to do something sedating is a medical term. And so I can say it'll make you feel good. It'll help you relax. It'll help calm you down. That's all sedating in a way. But no, you do not have to use specific medical language in order to do this. So the properties I'm going to list will have medical terminology. And so again, I'm not diagnosing, I'm not, doctor. So everything I'm saying here is for entertainment purposes. Let's put it that way. All right. So once you have the properties, and it's going to be anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial, and purifying, or releasing water retention, things like that, then you need to list the chemical compounds. That's why I put that chart up, because if it's an anti-inflammatory, if I go to that chart, I'm going to select sesquiterpene hydrocarbon compounds. I'm going to select sesquiterpene alcohol compounds. Okay. I do have a book on my website called Easy Essential Oil Chemistry, which will help. It's actually something that you really want to do, which is to learn the chemistry of essential oils. But you're not really learning it as a chemist. You're learning it from an essential oil perspective on how to choose essential oils more effectively. So choosing the chemical groups is an important thing here. In step 4, you're going to list the essential oils that have the properties that you're looking for in the chemical compounds. And, and it can be a long list. You can do the list for as, many oils as you want to list, which I do when I'm doing a consultation or an analysis. As the person speaking, I'm writing oils down, because I'm doing all 8 steps all at once as I, listening to the person, because I've been doing it a long time and I can do that, right? So as you practice and follow these things, you're going to be able to do that as well. So you select, make a list of oils. And then the next step you want to do is select an application. Now, if you're doing skincare, right? So that's an application. But you could be doing a body oil. You can be doing a diffuser. And even a diffuser, depending on why the skin is in the condition that it's in, you may choose to go along with the skincare to have a diffuser system, because especially if it's an emotional condition, smelling the oils is going to help create an emotional balance along with the physical balance that the emotions are creating, right? So if the emotions are fight and flight, stress, it can trigger cortisol release. It can actually, it can actually keep the lipid barrier from fully developing. And so you want to deal with the stress, and you can do that with a diffuser. So you have your application. And then number 6 kind of has a bunch of different steps to it. You're going to do your essential oil blending based on, do you have the oil? So you made a list of oils, and as you're looking at it, you go, oh, I don't have any neroli. Well, that means you're not going to put neroli in the formula, right? So that's kind of a common sense. Oh yeah, duh, I can do that. I have to have the oil in order to use it. Then the most applicable to your therapeutic focus, most effective. And that really comes down to the holistic structure that you're dealing with, right? So what oils you're going to choose? You want to make sure you're as complete what I like to call full spectrum as possible, meaning you're addressing as many potential causes along with the condition as you can think of, and then even add a little bit on things maybe you didn't recognize, right? So just a few more properties in there that will help make it more full spectrum, give a bigger kind of a program to your essential oil formula. Okay, now the oil's suited for the chosen application. So a diffuser formula could be a little different than a skincare formula. Now you have to keep in mind that when you do a skincare formula, it's going to be 1.5%. Okay, and so you want to consider that when you're putting your blend together. Fragrance profile, what do you want to smell like? If I have, same skin condition, 40-year-old man, 15-year-old girl, fragrance profile is going to be a little different, right? And so you need to consider that. And then fragrance structure, from perfumery, you're doing top note, base note, and middle note. And then finally, dose percentage. Now I said for topical skincare, it's going to be 1.5%, unless you're doing something that will not be used on a continued basis. If there's an infection or something you want to treat, you might go to 2.5%. You always have to be careful what oils you're using. So if you're using hot oils, for antimicrobial, you still got to keep that at the lower percentage. But it depends on the treatment, and it depends on your scope of practice, what your licensing is and what your history is as a therapist, what you know. And then you formulate and you write it down every time. That is such an important step. When I first started, there were so many formulas that were so good that I made that I could never repeat because I didn't write them down. That's me. In case you want to get in touch with me, I'm going to go over here, and I hope some people have given me some stuff to work with. Okay. Boom, 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 boom. All right. Anybody have anything? Because you're not talking to me here. Come on. All right. I'm gonna have to make stuff up. Either that, or I'm not seeing all of my comments. All right. I'm just gonna make it up, and I'll show you how I do this. So I need to share my screen. I need to go to some other stuff here. Let me just turn that off. I'm working from a few different screens here so that I have to bounce around a little. All right. So here I have hi, Kristen. Thanks. Okay. Fair skin, age 56, fine lines, aging. Grew up in California. Yeah, that can do it. Moles can, a lot of different, depends. You'd have to have it analyzed by a dermatologist to know what the mole is and where it's coming from. You want to be careful of its shape. You really want to be aware of that, but you should get it checked out. Living in Portland, in the country. Oh, nice. You gave me good information. Thank you, Kristen. That's fairly cool what you just did. All right. I need to go back to my slide here. I'm going to leave that up so that Okay. Nope. I have to take you down because you're in my way. All right. So here's what I do. Okay. So we have what we needed to know. It was, the age and fair skin. That's an important thing to be aware of. Skin type, and this gets into having a brain fart here. I can't remember what it's called, but yeah. Anyway, there's categories of skin, and yes, you have to consider that. The beauty of working with plant-based medicine, or I shouldn't say medicine, plant-based skincare, is that you don't really always select the basic structure of the skincare, which means the plant-based ingredients outside of the essential oils, for skin types. And I used to do this, and people say, well, why don't you have, different formulas for every skin type? I'm going, well, because how often do you go to your produce counter and look for produce for your skin type? And so when I create the basic formula, the base, plant-based ingredients, shea butter, cocoa butter, things like that, I'm looking at what I need therapeutically, not so much for skin type. And for the most part, it comes out kind of the same for everybody. All right, so I definitely have oils that I already know I'm going to do here. Oh, it's not letting me write in there. Why won't it let me write? I need to go in here. All these different screens I have to have open to do this. It's crazy. All right, one of my favorite oils is helichrysum. And here I need to make sure that it's coming up. Okay, look at that screen. All right. The reason I choose helichrysum is because helichrysum is the ideal essential oil for all skin conditions. It's one of the most potent anti-inflammatory essential oils. It's one of the best cell regenerative. So for wound healing, any kind of damage on the skin surface, it's one of the best oils for healing. And so helichrysum is definitely, and also for aging. When we talk about aging, the new terminology they're using is pro-aging, which, I'm not a big fan. I've always used healthy aging because, anti-aging is kind of silly because you can't stop aging, right? And so what you're trying to do, just like the longevity, right? The new systems of longevity, it's not about living longer. It's about living a healthy life, right? So living a healthy life generally refers to longevity. Living a healthy skincare life also means you're going to reducing damage, and fine lines and wrinkles are a sign of damage, right? So helichrysum is a good one. I'm going to write another one down here. And this gets into chemotypes, okay? So, I'm going to put the CT in there. What that refers to is rosemary has several different chemical structures depending on usually the elevation, but where it grows, it can change. And so with that, the rosemary chemistry changes. So rosemary cineol type, and that's cineol. When I say cineol, just think eucalyptus. That's what eucalyptus smells like, cineol. And so all the properties in eucalyptus would also be properties of rosemary cineol. Now, when it's rosemary verbenone, that means verbenone is in a higher content. You smell very little cineol in this oil. But the verbenone is similar to what I said about the helichrysum in being powerfully wound healing. So that's another one I want to do when we're talking about, healthy aging and prevention of damage to the skin, which comes up as fine lines and wrinkles. So where else are we going here? Let me look. Oh, California. All right. So I'm going to get into some of the base oils when I get there. I'm going to put a list because I think I've got it here. You said the stress is medium. So what I'm going to do is, instead of making a big, long list, I almost wrote Virginia cedarwood. If I had written Virginia cedarwood, what I would have been doing is creating a blend that works well for fight or flight. It has a compound in it. So I showed you the structure effect diagram. Compound called cedrol, which is a sesquiterpene alcohol in that group. I shouldn't be talking chemistry without the whole study, right? Anyway, I am. Cedrol. It lowers the fight or flight response. It raises parasympathetic activity. So this is actually a good oil. I put it in Virginia cedarwood. I put into my acne formulas because a lot of what causes acneic skin is inflammation. And where the inflammation comes from often is from stress, right? So Virginia cedarwood is a good oil to put when stress is involved. And then I switched it over to Atlas cedarwood, which also can regulate stress levels. But I'm going to have oils in here that will, when you're talking medium stress, we'd have to have a longer conversation in order for me to really understand that. But in this situation, Atlas cedarwood has a chemical structure that's similar to the helichrysum and rosemary verbenone. which is cell regenerative. I'm really focused on cell regeneration because of the sensitive skin, having grown up in California and concerned about aging of the skin, right? And so we want to, again, healthy aging means that as the cells turn over, we don't want damaged cells to replace the healthy cells. And that, cells get damaged through free radical damage, which the sun is absolutely about free radical damage. And so we want to make sure that we're protecting the cells from any kind of outside influence that would create unhealthy or damaged cells. We want to help the cells regenerate to be nice and healthy and looking vibrant and beautiful and wonderful. Even in Portland, are you up in the mountains? Because, the elevation, even though you're in Portland and, I'm in Seattle, and I know that the Portland area is kind of Seattle-ish. And except for this year, the sun doesn't show up too often. But because of higher elevation, now I'm, Seattle, I'm up a hill, so I'm not really that high elevation here. But, if I lived further either east or west, because we have huge mountains, east or west, the elevation is going to also challenge the skin in relationship to the UV damage. I'm going to give you some great formulation for UV damage. So what I'm going to do here is I have the list in my head. So I'm not going to go through that whole process because I talked way too long about all the other stuff about how do I get here. But I'll also tell you base note, middle note, top note, where I'm going with this. I could put lavender in here because lavender is kind of a do everything oil. And I think it's going to be protective. Now, what I didn't ask you about is fragrance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go with kind of a neutral fragrance. And, it's going to have a little bit of floral, kind of herbal. And it's going to smell great. I think I do all my, this is the way I do my formulations. I already have all the scents in my head. I don't need to have the oils up my nose. I smell it in my head, so that you're going to see how I do that as well. All right. So I'm going to only do 6 or 7 essential oils here just to keep it fairly simple. Atlas cedarwood is my base note. Helichrysum is a base and middle. Rosemary verbenone is forming my middle note. Lavender is forming my middle note. I want to be careful about, I would not put lemon or any of the citruses, especially bergamot, even though it smells nice, because bergamot is one of the most phototoxic oils. Lemon, orange, lime is also pretty high as phototoxicity, meaning that it reacts with sun and it can create damage to the skin through the reaction with UV rays. So I want to make sure I'm protecting the skin. These are all, again, you need to get them all checked. I know the essential oils are going to have a positive effect no matter what. It's going to have a positive effect. But because I can't see that, I can't select an oil specifically for that. The sensitivity I'm going to address with the base formula. This is going to be good sun protection. A lot of sun protection is going to come from the base formula as well. Okay, so let me put a couple other oils in here that I want to do. I think I'm going to add in here. I'm going to keep the. I'm going to go ahead and put copaiba in here. Copaiba. A lot of people spell it copaiba, but when I first started reading this, I read it comes from Brazil, so it should have a copaiba is really the way that word is, without the emphasis on E. I shouldn't be going over how to pronounce a word, should I? I should keep going with my formulation, but I am thinking my formulation as I do this. So the copaiba is anti-inflammatory, some cell regeneration, but gives a nice foundation here because I do want to, antioxidant, anti-inflammatory are 2 main things I want to have in this skincare. Every skincare formula that I ever do is anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, cell regenerative. This one is highly focused on those 3 categories. Excuse me. I need a nice top note here. For you, rose is going to be the best. Rose is rose, or I should say rose is the most therapeutic oil out there because of its complexity, its beauty, and its wonderfulness. Now you can see this is also my cost formulation, so I know how much I'm going to charge as I do this. Here's my percentage, and what I need to do is I need to make this up as I go along. Really sorry, I used to have a voice. Now it's kind of drifting and going away. All right, so I'm going to, now again, I'm doing this the way I do it in my practice, or actually not in my practice, but when I'm actually working with essential oils. I don't know why that's up at like that. Now, why am I doing only 5% of rose if it's so powerful? Oh, that's the reason why. Okay, sorry about that. I'm apologizing for something I'm not telling you I'm apologizing you for, but the percentage came up all wonky. And so, all right, so what I'm doing here is I'm creating my formula. I do everything in percentage because everything I do from weight, but from a percentage, you can do it from drops. You can do it however you want to do this formulation. And I need 3% more. So I will go 1% higher on rose. Rose is I'm going to do rose absolute, which has a little more fragrance to it. It's going to really come up, even at the low amount, it's going to come up pretty good. And I think I'll go 20% in rosemary verbenone. So what I have here is I have powerful antioxidant and anti-inflammatory, especially with the Atlas cedarwood and the copaiba, and the helichrysum, rosemary verbenone, lavender. Also antioxidant, really good anti-inflammatory, especially with the helichrysum, anti-inflammatory with Atlas cedarwood, copaiba, and cell regeneration. Actually, all of these with lavender, good cell regeneration. Lavender is kind of like rose in a way that it does everything. All right, so there's my formulation. Now, because of all the other conditions that you have here, I'm going to do a base formula. I'm going to make a serum, okay? So what you need to do is you need to melt down some shea butter. That's if you're doing this, you know, I make this stuff. Shea butter. I'm going to do some cocoa butter because I like the waxiness of the cocoa butter. And I'll keep this fairly simple. As I keep writing, I'm saying I'm making it simple. No, I'm not. I'm doing kind of complex here. I'll explain that CO2 extract in a second here. That should say astaxanthin. All right, what a CO2 extract is, it's supercritical carbon dioxide. It's a different way of extracting compounds out. You can get a lot of things that they call essential oils, but they're not. They're actually CO2 extracts that have larger molecules than occur in the essential oil. Essential oil is distilled, means the compounds have to be able to evaporate. And when you do a supercritical extract, you get the compounds that don't have to evaporate. Like in sea buckthorn, there is the beta carotene along with a few other compounds. Beta carotene, like in a carrot, does not evaporate, right? And so because of that, if there was an essential oil with beta carotene in it, like orange actually has beta carotene, and because it's pressed from the peel, and when it's pressed from the peel, it's still called an essential oil. Doesn't have to be distilled, doesn't have to evaporate. So you can get a little bit of beta carotene in orange peel. But the CO2s are just a very, very concentrated, very intensely therapeutic formulation. So sea buckthorn berry is a very good oil to use, or extract, I should say. In formulation, it's extremely antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, extremely good with a lot of research for protection from UV damage. Astaxanthin is one of the oils. Did I spell that right? Astaxanthin, yeah. Astaxanthin comes from a red algae. What I often say is that, living in Seattle, we have the best face food, berries and salmon. Salmon, the red color, is one of the things that makes it a good face food, because the red is the red algae extract, astaxanthin. And so astaxanthin is a powerful antioxidant and good protection from UV damage. It has lots of research on it. I can't tell you this, that my formula that I use, the Perfect Skin, which I don't have here, it's orange. And it's orange because of astaxanthin. Actually, a little of the orange comes from also sea buckthorn. But, when I'm out in the California sun, I hop off the airplane, I go to a meeting. I used to get sunburned a lot, but I noticed I don't get sunburned, and I don't have sunscreen on. And so there's a reason for that, which I can't tell you, but there's a reason for that. But what I can tell you is that there's research on shea butter, cocoa butter. Is it run on cocoa butter? Maybe not. Shea butter, sunflower, jojoba, sea buckthorn, and astaxanthin for protecting from UV damage. So if I were to do this, I'm going to go. I can go a little. I didn't talk to you about your skin. You're saying it's sensitive. I don't know if you use heavier compounds or thicker formulation, if that feels too heavy on your skin or not. Generally, I find with sensitive or thinner skin that the heavier formulations work out better. So the formula would have to be done in a way that is, you have to melt the shea butter, melt the cocoa butter, then add it with the jojoba and why did I do that? That's not what I was doing. I wanted to write 30% there. And you don't need much of, especially astaxanthin. I mean, even this could be too much. You'll stain your pillowcase when you go to bed if you have the serum on at night. Let me see. Oh, I don't need that much. Why does that keep doing that? But okay, 50%. I'm going to take away this. I have to do all this math in my head, so. All right, so now I have a formula that's my serum, okay? So if I were to go ahead and create this, I can actually show you how I would. So let's say I'm going to make 5 mils of the formula. I'm not going to put 5 mils into my skincare. I'll show you how I do that at the end. Oh, you know what I need to do? I do need to write that in. So my essential oil, because I'm putting it on the face, is going to only be 1.5%. I do not use more than 1.5% on the face. Okay. Now I have a formula for doing this, and all I do is I'm gonna try and run through this quick because I'm gonna end up about 15 minutes over. Hope you don't mind, but and then I can explain the formulation a little bit better. We're going to pretend that, whoops. What I'm doing is I'm creating a formula so I could make this, right? So it's just the way it works. Now, here's the reason why I use a scale with 2 decimal points. Because when you're doing drops or when you're making small amounts like this, every drop of oil matters. And you can't do a half a drop. You can't do 3/4 of a drop. And so you really need to do it by weight. And that's why I'm making 5 mils. 5 mils is about this size bottle right here. And then from that, I can drop this into my formulation. So let's say I'm going to make a 30 mil bottle. of the serum. Now, again, you're going to have to, there's a formulation that goes along with this, and you have to be able to melt the shea butter and then measure everything and put it into a container, or however you're making that work. But again, everything I do is by weight, 2 decimal points on my scale. That could be an issue, right? Because I don't have 3 decimal points on my scale. So I'm going to have to go, like, here's what I'm going to have to do in a situation like this. Now, I make more. I make 8 ounces, liters. I mean, I make a lot when I'm making skincare formulations. But in 30 mils, it's not letting me make enough. I need a little theme music to go with what I'm doing here, don't I? But I won't sing. I'll save you the stress. All right, so what I would do here is I would, with sea buckthorn, I'm going to put 0.01. With astaxanthin, I'm going to put 0.01. Or I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make a bigger batch of this, which still doesn't make enough there. Oh, that's why. Okay, I kind of screwed up here with my formulation. I did not save this. I am not a master at Excel or numbers, which is what I use here on my Mac. Oh, much better. Look at that. All I had to do was fix the calculations I was doing. All right. Let's go back to 30 because that's all you're going to make. All right, so this is what I do on a scale. I make this, and boom, bada bing. I'm done with a good formulation here. So I'm going to review what I did here based on what you gave me. I have, my base, middle, top note. I have Atlas cedarwood. I have copaiba. I have middle note helichrysum, which actually falls a bit in the base note if we're talking perfumery. Rosemary verbenone, lavender, and then rose is actually a middle note, or I could put that in a base note if I wanted to. But in formulation here, I want it to kind of come up to the top. It's going to be slightly rosy. I mean, the fragrance here is going to be very balanced, kind of it's just going to be balanced. I can't even say it's woody, herbal, rosy, right? Because all those are going to come in there to come together. So I have, these are things that I would ask questions on, about stability and when you are stressed, do you feel you're not grounded, or do you feel generally not grounded and don't relate it to being stressed? Atlas cedarwood and copaiba a little bit, more Atlas cedarwood. It's that tree trunk. I look at that in a metaphysical perspective and I say, that's very stabilizing. And so I want to use the wood from a tree trunk, right? That's that stabilizing factor. So I incorporate things like that into it. Anti-inflammatory, pretty much the whole formula is anti-inflammatory. The whole formula is good antioxidant. The whole formula is cell regenerative. So my focus here, and the reason why I'm staying so focused on just having those properties is the being in California growing up, the sensitive skin, you should say sensitive skin. And, I'm just looking at really as much overall protection as I can possibly put into a very simple formula, which is what I have here. And then my base formula for the serum is really centered around anti-inflammatory and lipid protection. I want to protect the lipid barrier because the lipid barrier can become damaged and compromised through UV damage. It can also be compromised through age. It can be compromised through, several factors that, I could ask questions and get more information, but, I don't need to because I'm going to put it all in there anyway. I try to, you cannot replace the lipid barrier, by the way. It has to come from diet and all the right ingredients in your diet because the lipid barrier comes from the inside. But you can mimic some of its activity. Now, sebum is what coats the surface of the skin, right? That's not the lipid barrier. The lipid barrier is deeper within the cells. and it has ceramides and free fatty acids and phospholipids. If I put lecithin into that base formula, I would be supplying the phospholipid, which in my serums, I do that. So the shea butter, cocoa butter give a more dense, waxy feel on the skin. It's not oily, but it feels strong, makes the skin feel strong. The sunflower, which there is research on sunflower for being UV protective. I actually wrote a paper on this for a conference in San Francisco, and I wrote it in 2009. And it was all based around me finding, looking at my skin going, why am I not getting sunburn anymore? And the research I found is that all of these compounds or all of these oils, they actually have research showing how UV protective it is. And in my conference paper, I was also talking a lot about protecting from melanoma and basal and squamous cell carcinomas, how the oils do that. Now, I always have to say this when it comes to cancer. In a lab, things are very different than on the body. So when you find studies that say, prevents cancer, don't count on it. You use that as more of a protective measure, just like putting on your sunscreen, which you should use, right? It's a protective measure. If you know those compounds can do it in a petri dish in the lab, it's going to have some activity in that direction on the skin, right? So it's never, cancer cure or anything like that. Whenever I refer to the studies on cancer, it's about understanding how the oil works, and it's mostly antioxidant protection. That's where that property comes from. All right, so the sunflower jojoba, just they feel right on the skin, right? So those two oils, and why I have in a higher percentage is because that's what's giving that slip and feel where it's a serum rather than an oil base or that fat kind of shea butter feel. Sea buckthorn and astaxanthin, those are in there to be like essential oils. And so those are powerfully anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, and just cell regenerative, all the good things that you want. And then the essential oils in 1.5%, because you don't need that much oil. And the other thing about 1.5%, essential oils used daily on the skin can become sensitizing. So at first, your immune system doesn't, they look at the essential oil compounds, your immune system, carries it to the T cells, the Langerhans cells from the skin, go to the T cells, and the T cells go, yeah, it's cool. We're okay with that. But if you're applying the same oil every day, it could be anywhere from 6 weeks to 2 years, that after that everyday application, sensitizing it. Now you have an allergic reaction. You can never use that formula again. You can use the single oils usually, but not the formulation. So I generally recommend changing up your skincare formulas. I have 2 serums that I sell, and they're different enough where it works. Now that's the essential oils. You won't have that much issue with the larger compounds and the butter and the cocoa butter and all that. I could go on and on and on and on and on, but let me see. You guys have any questions about what I've done here? Because that's kind of where I'm at there. Let me turn this guy off. We don't need you anymore. We do need me. Willamette Valley. Oh, so you're closer to the foothills. And you love vetiver. I could have put vetiver in there. Vetiver is a great oil for anti-inflammatory and also antioxidant. The rich heavy, you're going to get that with the I wasn't looking at your comments when I was doing that whole thing. I was pretending I was listening to you, because that, and I was just getting that from when you described the skin type, that feel, that protective feel on the skin is gonna be good. So, any other questions on this? Because I will answer anything that you guys want to throw at me here. The formula, it will, again, everything I'm after, everything I want to do, everything in skincare, anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, and cell regeneration. Those are the 3 main things, no matter what your skin type is. Those are the 3 main properties you need in your skincare. Helichrysum essential oil works on everybody's skin. It's just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So, all right. I know I kind of went a little bit over, but hey, why not? I'm going to end this now. If you're on YouTube, please go ahead, subscribe, like me, all that stuff. Here on LinkedIn, You can DM me if you have any questions, or email me, or on my website, jimharrison.com. I do have a scheduling where you can get 30 minutes. I had some, if you want to bring me into your spa resort for training, I do that. I'm generally not product affiliated. All of my education, even if I'm teaching you about the products that I have, which I'm not big in the marketplace. It's my products. You can buy them online, but it's my focus is education. The only reason I have products is my students said, "Can't you make it for us?" Yeah, I can. I used to have a skincare. I was one of the pioneers in plant-based skincare. So, we were in Whole Foods and everywhere else. So I have a really good background on understanding these things. So if you have any questions, even about some of the skincare that you have, I'm fine with evaluating the ingredients. Again, product neutral. I'm not out to sell you products. I'm out to educate you. Unless you want to buy products from me, go ahead, jimharrison.com. Buy everything. They're incredible. They're amazing. They're oh my God, how can you not buy them? Oh, wait, I'm not product neutral. Yeah. So I do everything from an educational perspective. And there's a lot of misinformation in the marketplace because a lot of information is coming from what I call marketing education. These companies teach you how to use their products. They're not trying to educate you on the ingredients and how you could put it together, right? So that's my deal. That's what I want you to understand about, what I'm teaching, how I'm teaching. If you have any questions, again, DM me, support@jimharrison.com. Schedule 30 minutes with me on my website, jimharrison.com. And this has always been fun. And thanks, Kristen, for putting your name in there and your information. Appreciate that, and that we're able to do that. And you know what? If you want that formula from me, go ahead and email me, and I'll actually make that for you and send it to you. Thank you, guys. Bye.